Sending a warm hello to folks who are joining live and on demand. And we'll give everyone a few moments to join before we get started. If you'd like to, please drop your location where you're physically sitting in the chat. So we love to see who's joining, how many people are here, and we're super excited to talk about how we can transform the world with sustainability and technology. I see some familiar names. Hi, everyone. Awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. My name's Sheri Hinish, and like many of you tuning in, I am committed to building a better world. Super excited to be here, and we have a great discussion in store on delivering a difference. This won't be another webinar that regurgitates a lot of the issues of the world. We want everyone to walk away inspired and, most importantly, informed on how you can unlock shared value in sustainability and take away pragmatic insights that you can implement in your own organization and with trading partners. The folks that you see on screen believe in the power of technology and people to transform the way we work, build, transact, and live in a world that we share. So before we dive in, I want to cover some admin. Feel free to drop any questions you have in the Q&A box. It's located in the bottom right portion of your screen. And you can also message any of the panelists in the chat box. We have a couple of polls, and our discussion will focus on 3 key themes tied to how procurement with purpose can create benefits from transaction to sustainable transformation. Then we're going to dive into the Q&A at the end. All right, panelists, are you ready?
Yes, we are.
Ready. We are ready.
Thanks, Sheri.
If you can share your name, a little about yourself, and Paul, you're going to be the first lucky person to get us started and set the bar for everyone to keep it brief so we have enough time to dive into our discussion today. Great. So you're first, Paul.
Well, thank you, Sheri, for the introduction. I'm Paul Polizzotto. I am the founder and CEO of GiveWith, a social impact technology company that allows procurement executives to embed social impact and sustainability right into their daily operations and turn sourcing and procurement into a powerful agent for social change.
Amazing. And Jason, you're up next.
Okay, thanks so much, Sheri. Hello, everybody. My name is Jason Wolf. I'm the Senior Vice President and General Manager for SAP's Intelligent Spend Group. Super thrilled to be here. Quick background, I've been working in supply chain and procurement for the past 20 years. My family and I have had the opportunity to live on 4 different continents during this time frame, and certainly shared experiences the globe around. And I am really thrilled to be part of this moment and to participate in this change. Thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. And the lady who needs no introduction, my friend Tania.
Oh, well, thank you very much, Sheri, for asking me to join you today. And it's going to be so exciting. So yes, I'm Tania Seary. I'm the founder of Procurious, which is the world's largest online network for procurement and supply chain. We have over 40,000 members across 145 countries, and just really excited, to be with you all today. Our objective during COVID has been to crowdsource confidence, and I think today is going to be a great addition to that.
Yes. So on that note, we'd love to hear from you and learn how COVID has impacted your procurement priorities. We'd like to start off with a poll. So if someone can press the button, we'll leave this open for 30 seconds, and I'll spare everyone from hearing me sing the Jeopardy theme song. The key here is really to find out where your focus is so we can weave this into our discussion. There are no wrong answers. Your responses are anonymous. And as you're looking at the options, you can see that some of the feedback that Tania and Paul and Jason have gotten has really varied from optimizing your supply base, focusing and doubling down on sustainability, and still that business as usual operating model and paradigm is very much alive and well, everyone. So we'll give this a few more moments. Please respond. We'd love to hear from you and share the results to set the stage for a provocative dialogue. We're going to uncover 3 key themes today. So hopefully, using your feedback, we'll try and weave in some key points. And sustainability is number 1. Thank you. Thank you. This is a great, yeah.
Awesome.
What are your thoughts, everyone, on that?
I guess I'm really excited. You know, I've spent 32 years, my career, 32 years in the space of social entrepreneurship and social impact. And to see that sustainability has been elevated to, in this poll, number 1, as Tania says, gives us confidence, right? That sourcing and procurement is a pathway for us to see great progress against these pressing issues, this growing list of global challenges that we face.
Exactly. And I think that this is also a good segue into, when you think about sustainability and how it's closely tied to reshaping finance, ESG investing, impact investing. And when we think about some of those shifts, a few key events come to mind. Larry Fink's letter to CEOs describing the shift in financial risk that included climate change, and also disclosures around ESG or some of those non-financial performance indicators that include sustainability, diversity, and data privacy, for example. And then we had WEF that named climate change as the leading risk facing businesses and our survival. So we know consumers, investors, trading partners, employees want to know where you stand on environmental and social issues, and how can you prove it? Why should sustainability be a priority? And Paul, I would love for you to kick off the discussion and unpack that a bit for us.
Well, Sheri, you start with finance. Of the $46 trillion in the US under management, I'm talking about capital under management, 1 in 4 of those dollars is coming out of a socially responsible social impact investment fund. So if you're the CEO of a corporation, 1 in 4 of those dollars will not buy your stock if you don't have a certain ESG rating. So irrespective of what your sales are, your profits are, if you don't have a certain ESG rating, you're not going to be purchased by one of those funds. And that is driving CEOs to ask their teams, what can we do to improve our ESG rating? Well, you can only do that through action. And I think what you're seeing, and as you point out, Sheri, it's about risk. I think in the early days, ESG was about risk mitigation, but I think it's increasingly, and I'm encouraged by seeing ESG, environmental social governance ratings, that the S in ESG is being elevated to become more important. You bring up diversity, equity, inclusion, and social justice, that we are in a very, very important century. This is going to be the century where we figure out how to live here more sustainably and more equitably. And I'm optimistic. I really do believe in the minds of this next generation are the business models, the methods, the processes for us to live here more sustainably and more equitably. And you're seeing it with consumers, 83 or 80, 85 or north of 85% of consumers are more loyal to companies that have made pledges and made commitments and have action around sustainability. You see that employees are happier and more content and less likely to leave companies that have made those commitments. So I think you're seeing that whether it's Larry Fink, who's leading the way with, I think he's 7.3 trillion. Imagine that, BlackRock being 7.3 trillion of that, 46 trillion dollars under management. So I think investors, consumers, and employees are basically saying to corporations, where do you stand? And what are we doing to take on these challenging issues? And I think what you're going to see today, and what I think we're all going to talk about, is that there's a business case for this, that we can drive business success at the very same time that we can take on these challenges. And that in fact, business is the key. I'm talking about corporations and business and commerce is actually going to be the key driver to us solving these challenges, that the days of relying exclusively on government to solve these challenges is clearly not working. And so corporations are stepping up and filling the void. You know, in the United States, I'm encouraged by, at a time when environmental regulations are being relaxed in certain areas, corporations are going in the opposite direction and actually doubling down on their commitments around climate and around clean water. So corporations are actually going in the opposite direction of some government regulations. And that gives me confidence and optimism that corporations are going to help lead the way towards a more sustainable and equitable future.
Awesome. Paul, I love your response. If I can diverge a bit, and I want to bring in Jason for his point of view, I come from industry, and a lot of supply chain and procurement organizations perceive sustainability as a cost, and it can be perceived as an expensive proposition. So Jason, we know about the rise of supply networks, and I want to hear your thoughts through the lens of technology. Can you share a very pragmatic point of view around the business case for change, and then how some of the non-financial metrics are teased out and used as the business case for change in adopting some of the supply network tech available?
I'm happy to do it, thrilled to do it, in fact. So thanks so much. Thanks for the opportunity, Sheri. So look, I think to answer your question around what's that business case for change, let's dig into the first part of your question there, the lead up, which was defining what a supplier network is, right? So I think maybe for the folks on the call that aren't aware of it, let me just give you a quick background on how this works, okay? So for companies, right, there's spend and there's buyers and there's sellers, or it's just a world of trading partners. And what we see with the development of these business networks or these digital collaboration hubs is we see simplicity, reach, and access to new supply is simpler and easier. The types of collaboration that are now fully digital and automated, it's incredibly powerful, from RFPs to requests for information to purchase orders to changes and cancels to invoice status. These are now instantly available on these supplier networks, okay? And that's valuable because it delivers us with the opportunity to exchange faster, to exchange simpler, and to exchange what I like to say with purpose. Mm-hmm. So let's dig into that. I think when you think about this case for change, it's not just financial, it's also human, okay? The financial case for change is very clear, okay? And I really like how Paul put it. It was really about the affinity towards attracting talent and being in an organization you can be proud of. We have a personal saying we use at SAP that your work life should be something you're proud of in your home life, okay? Mm-hmm. And for many of us, these are the same right now. All of us, most of us on the phone are at our homes. So whether we wanted it or not, our work life is part of our home life now. And so what can we do? You know, I think what we have to do is we have to think on the financial side, right? So one of the things that Paul mentioned was that 85% of consumers are more loyal to brands with sustainability goals in place. That applies to the workplace. If you're in a company and with a company that has a progressive and clear stance on how they help the community, you're more embedded, you're more engaged, and you care more about what you're doing. And if you step back and you think about the role of supply chain and procurement and the amount of spend that's possible, the amount of impact that you can have on a company, and then on those around you in the community, it's just absolutely staggering. I think I'm stealing another one from Paul. He said, the point of every transaction equals a point of transformation. I love that quote yesterday when we were working through some of the preparation. That point of transaction equals an opportunity for transformation. And that's what we have to do. And how do we do it, right? So we talked about this concept of the technology, and we talked about the concept of access to supply and finding them. It's there and it's available, so it's real. But now it becomes, instead of having a siloed, ESG strategy or component, how do I actually take that and make that part of my company's strategy?
Right.
And a great place to look at that is a company, BHP, which is a mining company operating really around the world. But they're really pioneers. We had a conversation with their CPO 2 weeks back, and he talked a lot about how do we take our strategy, and I'll cover this a little bit later as well, but how do we take our strategy for good and make it and embed it into our active buying, purchasing, and program and approach. I think these are the things that we see add value, right? Go after the spend, make it practical, and make it human, right? I think these are the things that we're seeing in the market, and we're thrilled to partner with customers that have that same stance.
Amazing, Jason. And I like how you mentioned that this is not a standalone initiative or project. This is really core, embedded in your DNA of who you are as a company. So super cool. Tania, I know that you have a really large reach and base of over 40,000 procurement professionals, supply chain professionals. What are you hearing? What are some of the key areas that are important based on your feedback?
Yeah, well, look, Sheri, I think the great news is that sustainability is well and truly on the agenda. And there's a few reasons for that. One is, it's an idea whose time has come. I'm sure everyone listening today knows how much work we've been doing in the last sort of 20 years, making sure that everything we do is sustainable, takes in environmental considerations, but also all these social considerations like modern slavery that we've had to consider, and the opportunity of investing in social enterprises. So things have been boiling away, but I think COVID's obviously been a turning point for us all. For one, we know these shocks are real, and that if we don't really address these kind of risks to the way we operate, that one day, that day will come where we really have to address them. So I think that's the point for sustainability right now, is people are saying this is something that we have to address. But also I think COVID, to Jason's point, has just made us so much more human, and realizing that, we want our lives to have purpose, and therefore we want to make sure that our organizations and jobs have purpose. So I think that's really elevating it. And in fact, our roundtable members have voted that social procurement's the #1 topic that they want to work on next year. So, that's very exciting. I think in the broader business environment too, this idea of naked profit is no longer really acceptable. Shareholders, if you want to have a say, buy a share, they say. And, I think people are expecting profit with purpose. They want to know not just that you make the money, but how you make the money. So there's a lot of different factors at play here that are really, driving us in this direction, which is fantastic. I guess I'd just say, I think the big hot topic that I'm hearing from our community is the shift to local sourcing. And as we know, and if Jason's been working with BHP, looking after your local community is key. But of course, now with, global supply, for 20 years, we've all been offshoring, outsourcing, buying from emerging economies. And really that's under question now because of the lead time issues. So I have an example within our community that, a cooking manufacturer who was actually sourcing chopped chips from overseas were forced to buy locally. And actually the best local supplier was an organic supplier. So they actually ended up with the benefit that we all know is the shorter lead times and better customer service. But they actually had a fabulous customer story in that, less food miles, organic, and actually maybe a better product. So I think these are some of the good stories we're going to hear. And importantly, in boardrooms, I think there's just going to be a lot of really interesting discussions around all these different opportunities and trade-offs between cost and value community, which can only benefit all of us.
Amazing, Tania. Thank you so much for sharing. You mentioned so many things in that response. I think what we're hearing, what I'm hearing a lot is the concept of leading with purpose. And I'd like to pull on that thread a little bit, because what I hear in some of the fireside chat executive roundtables is purpose may not be practical. But purpose really guides our relationship with the world. And when you think about the role of shared value, doing well and doing good, like all three of you have mentioned, purpose is really the North Star, and it can be that bridge in uncertain times that define long-term value creation. You mentioned the cost value paradigm. So I have a question for each of you, and I'd like to explore making it real. How do you cascade purpose into action? Unlocking that power of one, the power of us, and business to make sustainable change. So if you could share a couple examples about how purpose was positioned to create tangible shared value.
Yeah.
And Paul, we'll start with you.
Well, so you talk about purpose being practical. It's not only practical, it's profitable. And Jason talks about transactions having the ability to transform and that there's a business case. So let me give you an example about how the math at the point of transaction delivers greater value to suppliers, buyers, and society. Stakeholder capitalism starts at the point of transaction. Procurement with purpose starts at the point of transaction. We've always believed that sustainability, it starts with raw material sourcing, manufacturing, packaging, shipping, and end-of-life recycling. We left out some fundamental activities, selling and buying. The product doesn't exist unless it's sold and bought. And actually the transaction has the capacity to amplify business value for all stakeholders. An example is IBM and Boston Consulting Group. Okay, these are some of the biggest, most creative companies in the world. So let me give you a transaction. Boston Consulting Group is out to source cloud computing services. Okay, so they're looking at different players in that space. IBM with their their hybrid cloud comes forward and says, hey, BCG, in addition to our hybrid cloud offering, we're going to underwrite social impacts as part of our response to your RFP. And so in doing so, IBM underwrites social impacts through GiveWith that lead to carbon storage certificates through Indigo Ag, a regenerative farming social enterprise that's storing carbon through new ways of farming. So BCG, a couple of weeks ago, came out as the first global consulting firm to pledge to go net zero on carbon in 30 years, by 2030. So imagine BCG negotiating best pricing, best terms. So let's make sure that we cover that. The remit or the mandate for sourcing and procurement departments is to negotiate best pricing and best terms. So in addition to getting best pricing and best terms, BCG was able to receive carbon storage certificates as part of that transaction that helped them follow up on their pledge to go net zero. So in addition to best pricing and best terms, BCG was able to accomplish those business objectives at the expense of their supplier, rather than paying for those carbon storage certificates further down in the P&L from precious profits. So in this case, sourcing and procurement got to go to the C-suite and say, look what we did. We negotiated best pricing, best terms, and we were able to have our suppliers underwrite our net zero carbon pledge. So it begs the question. So BCG, clearly they got greater business value out of that deal, and we were able to store carbon as part of that deal. Where did the money come from for IBM? Well, IBM, 25% of gross revenues of the Fortune 500 is spent on SG&A, sales, advertising, marketing, costs associated with attracting a new dollar of revenue or retaining a dollar of revenue. In this case, they went to the underperforming client acquisition dollars, which there are many, and applied social impact in this case as a sales incentive. From existing client acquisition dollars, applied social impact. And Sheri, you talked about shared value. So what happened? IBM took client acquisition dollars that they currently have, were able to transfer that value to BCG, which formed a better relationship with BCG, gave BCG greater business value, stored carbon, all from money. Like no matter how much advertising IBM spends, they can't transfer that to BCG. So that 25% of client acquisition dollars are not being transferred to buyers or society. So essentially now what's possible is we're looking at that 25% of SG&A and saying in that 25% is greater business value for buyers and greater business value for suppliers. I mean, for society, and better margins for suppliers. So the beauty of social impact is that there's shared value. So at the point of transaction, we were able to accomplish stakeholder capitalism. Supplier did better, buyer did better, and we stored carbon. And so I think these are exciting times when social impacts as a sales incentive can be used to transfer shared value to buyers and society.
This is amazing. And I don't think that a lot of people are even talking about this sort of network-based stewardship. It's a completely different angle. Using social impact as a sales incentive. Hello. I mean,
and think about it, Sheri, there are trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars spent by corporations to attract a dollar of revenue or retain a dollar of revenue. Mm-hmm. Trapped in those trillions of dollars is the ability to deliver greater business value for suppliers, buyers, and society. It's right beneath our nose.
Right. Now, Jason, I do want to talk with you a little bit because you mentioned procurement with purpose. And I'm hoping that you are able to share openly some examples of that SAP, has helped customers really make that business case for change. Are you able to share a few examples with the viewers?
Hey, happy to do it. And, I'm fired up about that last example. I was just thinking a lot about this kind of that shared value concept and let's make that also tangible and real. So, and I'll answer your question, I promise, but I just really want to take it. So today we operate the world's largest trading platforms. When we think about the SAP's business network, it's larger than Amazon, Alibaba, eBay, all of them put together times 2. Okay, so we operate a network that transacts close to $3.7 trillion per year. Okay, and that's connecting 4.7 million businesses. So what does that mean? What that means to us is that it's a responsibility for us to help organizations think responsible, to think about their community. 3.7 trillion makes us like roughly what, the 4th largest GDP. Okay, so the power to impact, the power a company has over their community is very real. I want to make sure the audience feels that realism. The BCG example is a great one. So let's break it into the response into 3 things: company, then I'll break it into partnerships and examples. On a company level, BCG is a good one. Another one is SAP. SAP last week announced via our board member Adair Fox-Martin, we call 5 and 5 by 25. It's a company's clear direction, clear statement to the world that we're going to be environmentally and socially responsible. What is 5 and 5 and 25? It means that we will direct 5% of our addressable procurement spend to social enterprises and diverse suppliers by 2025. We're clear, we're focused on it, we're going to do it. Okay, very simple. Next, partnerships. You got to think about the ecosystem and you got to think about how do you help people do this and make it a part of a practical reality. That's where our partnership with GiveWith comes, okay? What we can do is we can take your social environmental goals, social impact programs, if you will, connect them to the GiveWith and the SAP Business Network in order to build a clear and sustainable, observable, traceable, visible result where we can help you find supply and develop suppliers to meet your ambitions. So if you have a 5 and 5 and 25, all of you we recommend it to everybody, right? We can help you bring that to life via our partnership with GiveWith. Let me give you a couple of examples. I know I'm pushing it fast here, but let's talk about this. This is something that means a lot to us. I was most recently running the Asia Pacific Japan region before taking over as a global leader. And one of the things that resonated with me is we set out a challenge to our sales force and our pre-sales force to work with customers to develop purpose-based stories. Lo and behold, after about 14 months, we collected 97 examples where we identified companies across Asia that are willing to put forth procurement-based social impact programs. It's happening in the world. Be part of this, right? Be part of this movement, okay? Specifics, BHP, I talked about them a little bit earlier, but they launched their program. They're gonna channel $500 million of spend to small and local suppliers throughout Australia. They're gonna take that and then roll it out to the Americas. And by channeling those local suppliers, they're building the community. So it's buyer, seller, community. That triad comes together and it forms really what we can impact. Another great example, staying in Australia, they're just the leaders, I think. IAG, Insurance Australia Group, okay? We worked with them on a codenamed project we called Project Sunrise. And this is where we worked with IAG to develop a marketplace of Indigenous owned suppliers available to our buyers on the network. The net result of that was we identified great suppliers for the buyers in that community to access. And this was everything from flowers to cooking to office supplies. And what this did is it raised the awareness and it raised the status and accessibility of some of these smaller enterprises. And that's something we're proud of. We talked about the home life, or your work life should be something you're proud of in your home life. I can tell you, when you have the owner of a flower shop on main stage with all of our customers kind of crying at her opportunity, it hits home real fast and real clear that this is powerful and that you can impact people's lives. And the last one is with Nielsen here in the States. It was a supplier risk program. They connected with a company called Made in a Free World. And they built a sustainability program into how they evaluate and look at things and signs of forced labor. And these are things that are just 3 quick examples of great companies making pragmatic shifts to do things the right way. And so we're really thrilled to be part of that.
I love it, Jason. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think one key takeaway that comes out of your response is that this isn't just about transforming economies and the way that we buy. It's about transforming the lives of people.
Yeah.
And that is something that has immeasurable value. Now, Tania, you know I'm coming to you next because I know that you have a lot of examples and experiences that we've talked about. Can you share a few examples on how purpose has been positioned to create tangible shared value in your career?
Well, thank you, Sheri. Yes, there were so many examples. And I think that really highlighted to me the great opportunity for all of our community to really enrich their own careers and get involved in all these amazing sustainability projects that are available and really give their own career purpose. So, you know, I have a saying, you may not be able to change the world, but you can change your category. And it really is amazing how much scope that you have within your own influence to drive some of these outcomes. And, you know, if I look at my own career, I mean, I've just had an amazing journey. And when I reflect back, a lot of the companies that I've actually worked with have had a very strong sense of purpose and knew that corporate stewardship was key. And therefore, you know, we're always investing in these projects. So one of my first memories are of going in a helicopter across Kimberly-Clark's huge, you know, plantations and understanding the total life cycle cost of paper. And that actually, you know, these were like farms and, you know, that this was a sustainable thing rather than paper production being this, you know, evil sort of process. And that really started me. Then, you know, I got into the aluminum industry, understanding total life cycle costs there. Got involved in microfinance in Southeast Asia, did some work with the Great Barrier Reef Research Project, Foundation. And, you know, all these different experiences, understanding sustainability and the real importance that it plays in corporate reputations and, you know, for organizations really hit home. And I think, you know, when we first started talking about social procurement in earnest, maybe 10 years ago, it was seen as something that actually cost more, you know, both in time and money. But the penny really dropped for me when, you know, I moved to the UK and started hearing, you know, Social Enterprise UK, for example, Mark Holbrook and, you know, Hugh Chamberlain. I think Adair's just become an ambassador for Social Enterprise UK, Jason. But, you know, the thing is that actually now working with some of these organisations, you're actually getting better service and better value, So I know that SAP, for example, uses, individuals with autism and on the spectrum to do a lot of their coding. They're actually doing a better job. So, these are the exciting stories wherever you look on the UN sort of sustainability development goals, that there's so much opportunity for us. A couple from me, just this year, a National Postal Service came to me and said, you would not believe this, Tania, but, we engaged an Indigenous supplier to really, as part of our supplier diversity framework, and selected some categories that we thought they could supply. And it was more of a policy point of view. But when COVID hit, that supplier was the only organisation that could provide them with hand sanitizers. So, it actually became a strategic supplier for that National Postal Service. And, the other story I would say to people listening out there when they're thinking, how can I make this real for me, is really wherever there's a labour cost, there's an opportunity. And we often think about maintenance services, gardens, what have you, as an opportunity to engage social enterprises. But, also some of the office working and outsourcing is a big opportunity. And one of the projects I love at the moment is some of the major banks are actually engaging single mothers to man help desks for other mothers who are experiencing financial hardship, and it's a win-win. The banks are actually, managing their debt and making sure that they recoup those, but you're giving employment to women who actually could be the customers. So, but Sheri, there's just so many things, and I think the key thing is for you to feel that you can make a difference in your role as a category manager. You just need to be a bit creative and really, connect all the dots.
Thank you, Tania. Thank you so much for sharing. And you're right. I think we are witnessing in real time that our capacity to realize our own business objectives, personal objectives, are wrapped in others realizing theirs. So I don't know that I have ever felt this so much in my life before, that business cannot succeed in societies that fail. Right. And we have some of the advances. I want to get into the third theme, the nitty gritty of how to make it happen. We have advances in technology. I'm going to throw out all the supply chain buzzwords at once. Visibility, transparency, traceability. And when we think about, businesses being that conduit for impact, as you mentioned, Paul, earlier, it is evolving. And Paul, I'm also going to mention something that you said yesterday, that we have enough money to address society's issues. We already have what we need, so to speak. So this is going to be a provocative question to round out our three themes. Could this really happen, where businesses work together to create a sustainable economy and while making money? I want you to outline how and answer some of those big questions that are front of mind for people who are tuning in and listening. And we'll start with you, Tania.
Well, look, we're spending the money anyway. So why not spend with purpose? As I just said, there's so many organizations and people out there who can actually do what we need, but actually drive the outcome that's a win-win for everybody. So I don't think there's any compromises here. And, absolutely doable. And a lot of companies are doing it. I think what I've realized in the last year or two is that the more human we become, the more that we want to drive these positive outcomes, actually, the more we need technology. Because if you look at all these issues that we've discussed today, all the variables that we need to consider during a sourcing process to make sure we're making the right decisions, there are just so many variables that we actually need the technology to keep track of it. And also, as you said, to have the visibility into our supply chain and make sure that everyone is complying with what our North Star, as you said, Sheri, that they're all in line for our own, objectives and compliance goals. So I think the more human we become, the more we're going to need technology, which is quite an interesting sort of dichotomy, I guess. But yeah, very exciting.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing, Tanya. And Jason, how do we make it happen? Do you think that we have what we need to change the world at our fingertips right now?
Oh, I think we do. I think it's proven out in the reality of how supply chains work. COVID has forced us to go digital, right? There's a lot of companies that used to run their supply chain on a whiteboard and an Excel spreadsheet. Well, the reality is you can't take that whiteboard home. Like you can't like cut it up into pieces and let everybody take their piece home and then like it somehow magically puts itself back together. So the reality is the world has forced us to go digital and to go full duplex, meaning lots of back and forth collaborations between companies, okay? So good news, we've moved to a digital framework. That improves the visibility and traceability and every other buzzword we can think of. Now, as we're connected, what do we do with it? And I love the idea that you just talked about. It was be human about it, right? So if you're a buyer in an organization, start simple. How do you help your organization behave like you behave? Okay. If you make conscious decisions to make good choices with who you're buying from, apply that same logic, that same rigor, that same expectation on your company. And the impact is great, right? We talked about the relative benefits that it has on consumers. Businesses are consumers. It's the same impact. The relative impact it has on talent. Talent wants to go at places that do good, right? And the point was made that spend is happening. It's absolutely happening. So now be bold, but it's not too hard. Take your strategy and operationalize it, right? SAP is only an example with the 5 by 5 and 25. It's a clear statement to the market. This is what we're doing. Help your company develop that statement. Connect that statement to your day-to-day purchasing operation, and the buyer, the seller, and the community will naturally be impacted by the manifestation of the technology and the human component. And that's how we become human. And frankly, that's how we actually literally transaction by transaction, to steal from Paul, transform.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jason. And Paul, I want you to unpack social value economics, because when I first learned about GiveWith, I was completely blown away by this point of view and some of the videos that you've made and evangelized. So can you explain social value economics to tie in some of the key themes and takeaways that Tanya and Jason have just mentioned?
Yeah, I want to talk about Tanya and Jason, a couple of things that they said. Tanya brought up the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the global goals. It's going to run us as a planet $5 to $7 trillion to accomplish those goals. Okay, where is that money going to come from? You see, right now, Sheri, we're solving our challenges from a place of scarcity, from a system of trickle down, corporate trickle down and government trickle down. And we find ourselves solving problems at the bottom of the economy from a place of scarcity. The resources simply aren't there at the bottom of the economy. But as you brought up, the money is there. The money's at the top of the economy. And as Jason describes with transactions, the most fundamental activity, you talk about human. Think about what we do as human beings every day. The vast majority of our time is spent on the production of goods and services that we exchange for value, usually a currency, and that we then use to buy more goods and services. That's what we do all day as human beings. It turns out that the most fundamental human activity, which is involved in commerce, is actually the answer to us funding these challenges we face, and that they're at the top of the economy. There are about $97 trillion a year that make up global transactions. And it is there where the money is to solve these challenges. Pre-trickle down, pre-distribution, at the top of the economy. Okay, so when you look, I hope that we made the business case with IBM and BCG and Indigo Ag that a transaction that happened between major corporations, a sourcing and procurement department, could achieve greater business value, best pricing, best terms, more business value. The supplier could better utilize its current client acquisition dollars, and we could store carbon. So we made the business case. So let's take that business case and apply it to $97 trillion. Not only will we generate greater business value for sellers, buyers, but we will open the floodgates to take on the most pressing issues of our time. The money is there, and transactions have the capacity to transform. And to bring it and make it real, I mean, Jason describes SAP Ariba. SAP Ariba with 4.6 or 7 million suppliers and buyers exchanging what is, more than $3 trillion worth of transactions. To put that into perspective, if we've made the business case that supplier, buyer, and society can benefit at the point of transaction, do you know that if just 8% of transactions that went through the SAP Ariba marketplace applied that business case that I just shared, SAP would be directing $3.2 billion of new funding for taking on the most, just 8%. I hope we've made the business case that 8% of those transactions should in fact be happening in that way on SAP. That's the gravity and magnitude and scale that SAP Ariba can achieve at the point of transaction. They can deliver more business value to suppliers, buyers, and society at the point of transaction. And I think that's enormously exciting because the resources are there. And so I think when you look at this coming century, the resources are there. We have the answers. It's about human beings paying attention to what's right beneath their nose. And what's right beneath our nose is the ability to solve these challenges. And so we can pass on to the next generation a future of optimism and possibility instead of crisis after crisis. We owe that to the next generation. And we have that opportunity before us now. And now's the time for us to act.
Yes, I agree. I'm trying not to cry. Thank you so much, everyone. I mean, I just feel so inspired right now. And, we've talked about, how value shared, value amplified, value delivered can really create real impact in the world that we share. And purpose and procurement are right at the center of all of this. So thank you so much. We do have 12 minutes to dive into some Q&A, and I know that we have a few questions here already that have come in. So I'm just going to take them in the order that they've appeared. The first question is for Tania.
Oh,
yes, darling. At 3:30 a.m. You're such a champ, by the way, for showing up. How have you seen the conversation around procurement with purpose shift over 2020? So with some of the COVID events, oh, by the way, human health crises, social crises stateside, and climate change, which is still an emergency. Can you share a bit for everyone watching?
look, I think the big change has been, this local sourcing conversation. So, yes, we've had the environmental crisis, which has been highlighted by the bushfires, which created their own supply situation. Modern slavery is front and center. But I think the big shift for me has been this conversation about local sourcing, which has been precipitated by, the disruption supply chains due to COVID. So I think that's the exciting place. I think a lot of people are talking about it. I gave the example earlier of the chopped chips, but, simple things like getting your laptop serviced rather than sending it into headquarters. Why not use the local, supplier, the computer repair guy? Or use your local stationery store. This will help revitalize some communities that have really been hard hit by COVID. And as Jason knows with his work with BHP and mining companies, if you keep the family employed, you have a vibrant community, everyone wins. So local sourcing, I think that's the shift.
Okay, and that's actually a great segue into the next question that's just come in live. Are any of you seeing any specific industry or sector or region that's doing a great job leading on this that others could maybe model? And we can drop in examples in the chat as well. Anyone?
I guess I could jump in from a regional and a sector. We talked about it. It's maybe 3:30 a.m. there, but it's an important part of the world. And in my experience, and and I've had a chance to work in lots of parts of the world and live in lots of parts of the world. You know, I love the emphasis and focus in Australia and frankly, a lot of Asia. There's a lot of focus on understanding how you impact and grow a community. For Asia, it's the land of, you know, hyper growth economies. And so realistically, that purchase power, that purchase decision does need to power the community, because that's actually how you develop a sustainable long-term, you know, top GDP producing country. So I think what I see overall from a regional perspective, I see Australia as a heavy leader in practical execution of the programs. I see lots of the regions with a lot of emphasis on the social and the benefits of communicating the strategy. But when it comes to practical basis, I see Australia, I see Asia doing a really nice job there. Mining was mentioned as an industry, that's clear. There's tons of examples that we have there, but we've got other ones. We have a really big retailer in the US. I don't know if I can mention the name, so just say a large retailer. And they have a really great program focused on, you know, I met with their CPO maybe 2 weeks ago, and he's really focused on directing business to Black owners. And I really love the focus and emphasis of how he's taking, frankly, a terrible social situation in the US, where I'm based now, and turning it into an opportunity to develop suppliers and to channel spend. So, you know, I think our retail customers also, because of the need for locality and supply and hyper-localism, you know, they're also been big trendsetters when it comes to this.
Thank you, Jason. We have 8 minutes and we have another question, which is actually pretty provocative. I would love to get someone to answer from the panel. This question says, having worked in systemic generational hunger for over 30 years, how can global corporate supply chains work to solve the food supply with regard to hunger and poverty to create greater positive social change in the long run?
Wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of food waste in the world. Paul?
Well, I guess going back to the power of transaction is that today, GiveWith has used transactions through Meals on Wheels and other organizations to use a transaction between a supplier and a buyer to feed seniors and to fulfill food banks and other, to help fund organizations that are on the front line, especially during COVID, as we've all talked about. These problems have just been exacerbated. And so although I'm not as involved in the supply chain side of things as Jason and Tanya, we are certainly using the power of transactions between suppliers and buyers as a way to bring resources to people in need. And so I think that is one of the ways that we're doing it.
Yeah, just to add on what you've just described, Paul, I think food miles and food scarcity is a really big opportunity to just explode old paradigms. And Tanya, you mentioned hyperlocalism. And I think part of the challenge has been being able to give some of these smallholders access to participate in a global economy. So certainly, digital networks, supply networks help bridge some of that, but then also having that awareness where, you have shorter lead times, you have more autonomy in your supply chain, you have less risk in terms of disruption when you source locally, and when you actually engage people in local communities, it's a win-win, right?
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit, Tanya? I know you have some experience in this arena, and Carrie is very excited that we've addressed this question.
Well, look, I think the exciting thing, and people that I'm working with, are actually actively involved in a lot of programs in Africa. And, I think this is, once again, I come back to technology. How could, emerging economies, economies that are struggling with issues like food and starvation, tap into the knowledge networks that exist around the world to help them? And I think, things like Zoom, being able to bring people together is really changing that dramatically. And I mean, the technology is just mind-boggling. Even, we know about drone delivery of not only food, but also vital medicines in countries like Africa. And, you also have just just the agricultural side of things, which is just mind-blowing, the things that they're actually doing in some of these countries to get water supply, nutrients, it's next level. So once again, if you're a category manager working in one of these sort of food or food science companies, probably the things you're learning are things that could help some of those organizations. And, you know, that's what I'm trying to say is really everything's there. All the toolkits, all the opportunities are there for you to make a difference. You just have to have purpose and know what you want to do and where your company's heading, and make all the dots connect. But, you know, there's no reason why some of the category managers on this webinar today couldn't help solve a problem like hunger, whether it's, you know, food from restaurants in their city to Meals on Wheels to helping some of these countries in Africa or other regions around the world that are struggling. You know, the power really is within our hands. We just have to realize it.
Yeah, and it's the interconnectedness. You know, Tania and Jason have talked about local, right? That we have to make these solutions local. You know, it's, you know, the average meal in the United States is 1,500 miles from, you know, farm to fork. Think about what that means to climate change. See, these things are interconnected. If we solve these issues locally, we can solve, you know, food shortages locally, and at the same time, make a contribution to reducing the impact of climate change. They're all interconnected, and local solutions mean, you know, more food in these local communities, more jobs in these. We need to start thinking. Obviously, you know, it sounds cliche, you know, to think globally and act locally, but the fact is that our future demands that to be the case. Absolutely demands that to be the case.
100%. We have someone, Nasir, in the chat box. He wants to know if anyone can share examples that are specific to the Middle East, because that is a region we haven't discussed today yet. So Paul, Jason, Tania, do you have any concept examples that you can share that are from the Middle East region?
I'm trying to think.
Not to put you on the spot at 3 a.m.
Yeah, no.
You put us on the spot.
Yeah. So with SAP Ariba being global, but we have not moved into the Middle East yet, and certainly that's in our future. We're funding organizations in Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, Guatemala, all over the world. But the Middle East is a place that we have it as in our sights as a place for expansion. And so I appreciate his question, and it's something that we do talk about as a company as being a future area of the planet that we're headed for to bring.
And what I'd suggest, I mean, it's so Sheri, I don't know off the top of my head, but I do have this commitment. Let's take the request from the person that asked. Let me take it, and I will I'll find out what we're doing and also share. There'll be examples. I just don't know them off the top of my head.
Yeah. And we'll follow up.
But happy to do it, and then happy to also discuss where it's being done, because I know it's being done with the local. I just can't give you a spot example, but you know what? It's a good opportunity to go talk to someone that's doing it, right? And that dialogue is what creates the change inside of your own organization.
Absolutely, Jason. And we would be very interested in collaboration with SAP Ariba around bringing our solution, our resources in conjunction with Ariba to that part of the world.
Amazing. We have time for one more question. And Jason, this is for you from Marta. Hi, Marta.
Hey, Marta.
What advice would you give people who are starting their journey in sustainability or social impact?
Okay. Hey, listen, so Marta, thanks for asking the question, and thanks for choosing to act, right? The act of asking the question is the first path to starting a program. It sounds like you're on the path, so we're here for you. Number one is you probably have some sort of CSR initiative. I'd find out what those are, okay? And then I really love, I'm stealing the line from Tania. I keep stealing from these two, but it's one category at a time, right? You don't have to confuse vision and strategy with a blanket result. You really have to start with an act of a purchase. So going back to that, each purchase is an opportunity for transformation. Let's take your company's CSR goal or steal from SAP. 5 and 5 by 25. It's simple. It's straightforward. It can be done. It's accessible. And let's go category by category and establish a KPI around it. We do that. We make a difference. Each transaction accumulates that transformative benefit. And we really appreciate you wanting to start that opportunity in your company. So thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Jason. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We are at time. We hope that you enjoyed this session and how procurement with purpose powers a sustainable world and also making the business case for change. Feel free to reach out to any of us on social media, wherever you interact, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And we would love to hear from you and continue the discussion. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.
Thank you so
very
much.
much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.